Feeling good. All the money in the world spent on feeling good. Well, the wine old met me on the street. Said, help me on to some sneaking Pete. Please help me, brother, I wish you would. 'Cause I feel so bad and I wanna feel good. Feeling good. All the money in the world spent on feeling good.
Good evening. Welcome to Economics with Dr. Bill. I'm Dr. Bill Watkins from the Center for Economic Research and Forecasting at California Lutheran University. And we've established this little show to talk about the economy in California and where things are going. Today, I have a guest, Bruce Stenslie, and we'll be talking about economic development here. Before that, we always start with a little bit of what's going on. And obviously what's going on right now is market volatility. We've seen stock market go up 500 or 600 points a day and go down 600, 500 points the next day. And I think not all of that's associated with the downgrade. So last week there was a downgrade and that caused Monday morning's spike. But I think what's going on is that people, businesses, government officials are starting to figure out that this recovery is not going to be like most of them. And we've had these spurts of sort of growth. We've heard about green shoots a couple of years ago, and then we had a little bit of growth second half of last year, and then it's fallen off. And we think, and because we're being asked right now, there's a double dip coming, and lots of people are revising their forecast down. We don't think that a double dip is coming. We think that this is rolling out just about like we expected, a long, slow recovery. It's a bit of a struggle, and you get some good data points, you get some bad data points, but on the end, as long as they're all rolling up, we're pretty good. One good sign was the jobs report for July. We saw 100,000 jobs, a little more, and that was a real key thing. We're going to be looking closely for August's job report. As long as that's above 50,000 jobs or so, we'll think the probability of a recession hasn't gone up a lot. This is admittedly poor job growth, and it's nowhere near enough to lower the unemployment rate, and it's going to be a while before we get to there, but it would imply long, slow struggle upward, but no recession. Another thing that came out this week is consumer confidence is at the lowest level since 1980. Now that's a bad sign. I think, though, that consumer confidence is heavily influenced by what's been in the news, the day it's taken, or the week it's taken, and that survey, took place during the debate over the extension of the debt limit for the United States and all that. So I think it's probably biased downward. We've seen some riots in Europe, and there's the default problems in Europe, all that. So I think that was overly influenced. Expect to see a little bit of a bounce there. We also, in terms of the market volatility, think that part of what we see is people are finally getting to the point where they understand that the European Union has to break up. I mean, there's no reason that Greece and Spain, Portugal should be in the same currency zone as Germany. And so how that's done is going to be a little touchy. If it's done well and it's well planned as putting the European Union together, then we'll get through with some market volatility. If it's done poorly, then we got a chance for a real financial crisis again. But that's down the road probably. We take the chances for a double dip probably maybe 25%, not too high, and not anything we're really worried about right now. Although we admit we're watching Europe very closely. One good thing that came out is Gavin Newsom came out with an economic development plan. And it doesn't really matter what you think about the plan, but the fact that he came out with one is a bit of a big sign. Nobody at the state level in Sacramento has appeared to be taking job creation and economic development seriously for the past decade. And Gavin Newsom has come around to taking it seriously. He took a trip to Texas. He's written a report. There's some good ideas in there. There's some things I do a little differently, but it's good to see. And we'll probably talk a little bit about that more with Bruce as we go along. So that's the economic history. Any other question on that stuff before we go?
No, it's fascinating stuff. The ride's been a little bit too topsy-turvy for most of us, but I hear you loud and clear on the point about some of the short-term volatility in this. People, watching the news and the politics.
Sure.
One of the things that we were looking at, for example, in Ventura County, is we saw a great April and May in the jobs market where we dropped our unemployment rate. Mm-hmm. We looked last 10 years, and it goes up every month in June, and lo and behold, it went up in June, and half the people thought the world was falling apart. Well, no, actually it does this every year, so let's not panic. Let's understand there are cycles and there are patterns. So.
Yeah, and even that seasonal adjustment, we don't want to get into how it's done. It's a nasty.
Too complicated for me.
Well, it makes sausage making look good, and but that creates its own errors and stuff. So you got to watch out for that.
So no, good summary. I did read the Gavin Newsom report. Actually, I thought I agree 100%. Half the battle is for someone in a leadership position to articulate the importance, the value of investing in the economy, that it doesn't just take care of itself. Right. That on the one hand, you must deal with some of the overregulation. But on the other side, he's also talking about some of the virtues of California. And we found it validating locally in that he looked at...
you mentioned Oxnard 3 or 4 times, right?
Several times. Yeah. And actually he's talking about this region's strength relative to its exports, relative to our high-tech manufacturing. We compare pretty well in the number of high school graduates or college graduates as a percent of the population. We can do better there. But given our emphasis locally as local economic development strategy and trying to retain and expand the manufacturing and the production side of the economy, we agree with his emphasis on that.
Well, the high school degree thing, we got we got 20,000 ag workers here.
Yeah,
so
that's right. And there have been reports recently, and I'd love to hear your comment. I think, is it Brookings that has recently talked about Ventura County being one of the communities with the extremes of the high income and the low income. And again, I think it's, we got a lot of Amgen high-paying jobs, and we've got a lot of ag low-paying jobs, and the fact that we've got that diversity isn't in itself bad. We wish we had better-paying jobs in the middle.
Yeah.
But I think
that's something I've talked about quite a bit the last maybe a decade or so. And if you really want to go to ground zero, you go north 30 miles to Santa Barbara, right? You talk about rich and poor.
Yeah.
But I do think it becomes a problem when there's not a middle class and there's not a transition.
Agreed.
And good reason to keep manufacturing jobs and those middle-class jobs here.
Yeah. A little scary in the manufacturing world, though, as they become increasingly high-tech and more automated. They tend to be higher-paying jobs, which is good, but aren't quite the pathway jobs that used to be for the high school graduate.
That's right.
And where we're going to replace those outside the service sector, if you have the trick on that one, we're all in.
Have you seen the 3-dimensional printer?
No, I've heard about these. I've not actually played with one.
No, you don't have to actually play with one, but you need to go to YouTube.
Okay.
And Google first video for a 3-dimensional printer and why. It's amazing. And the way I see it, it's just like the copy machine. You remember that first copy machine? It was at Thrifty or a drugstore, right?
It was magic.
It was magic, and it took a dime.
Yeah.
And then the bank had it, and you could go there, but if you banked there, you got it free.
There you go.
Eventually, we all have these in our homes, right, and offices. And that's what I think, businesses are starting to put these 3-dimensional printers in place. They can make amazing things.
Right.
In the long run, though, we're going to have one in our home.
Right.
And you're going to get the instruction. You can download it from Amazon.
Yeah.
And there goes a whole bunch of manufacturing jobs.
Make your own stuff.
Yeah.
Which brings us back to the only real solution long term to this stuff is educating people so they can participate in the innovative side.
That's exactly right. Yeah, that's
discovery and creation. But yeah.
Very good.
So the rest of the Newsom report, are there parts of it that you were less sanguine about?
The problem I have is that the government officials always think that it takes government planning to have economic prosperity.
Sure.
And I sit there and go, if that was the case, we'd have never had the Industrial Revolution, right? That had no government planning at all. And so, again, a big step in the right direction.
It's a great step. Yeah.
Not exactly what I would write. I'm just very skeptical of the ability of government to create prosperity.
To lead.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we're eager to see if there's actually ever going to be some traction on the several voices now that have weighed in the notion of reducing some of the regulatory, at least repetition, overlap, or unreasonableness The problem is everybody's got a different definition of what's reasonable, and it's very difficult to move.
Yeah, and the fact that the repeal of AB 32 failed, and since then, the day that the Governor Brown signed the acceleration of AB 32, if you will, he tweeted a couple times that was going to, he was proud of that.
Yeah, I understand that. We do hope that in Ventura County, speaking just provincially and as a cheerleader locally, we have a handful of businesses that are really on the cutting edge, we believe, of producing some new technologies that may, in the perfect world, and this would be the perfect world that the Browns are imagining,
sure,
that their policy will be catalyst for creating new markets for those guys. I'm not sure that that's quite the right equation, but if there's any piece of that, Ventura County is the classic place where we can take some of the old aerospace manufacturing capacity, hang on to it, and convert it into some new technologies, not all of which are green.
We also have these great higher education institutions.
That's right.
We're about halfway between UC Santa Barbara
Yep.
and UCLA.
Yeah.
And, no offense to LA, but a lot of people would prefer to live in Ventura. And some people might prefer to live in Santa Barbara, but they may not be able to afford to. And it does seem like a logical place along that 101 corridor.
And along with my provincialism here, just as long as I'm at the table, almost exactly some of our regional economic development strategy these days. I mean, any local economic strategy is about retaining and growing, of course, the resources you've got.
Sure.
And some of it is about, a significant piece is about accelerating entrepreneurship, which involves making those connections with the universities and such research capacity. Mm-hmm. But business attraction is something that we're trying to get into a little bit. Unfortunately, our competitors in business attraction have always driven to the low road, as they say. Come here because we got cheap land and cheap labor.
Your competitors are what, Texas and Michigan?
Exactly. And we don't win on the cheap land and
sure,
cheap labor. But if our business attraction strategy is around finding opportunity for businesses growing out of LA and would prefer the greater quality of life and greater opportunity that we think is Ventura County. A lot of spin-off out of UC Santa Barbara that just doesn't find the land out there in Goleta or affordability, sure, and they can slide down the freeway this way, sure, rather than landing in San Diego or the Silicon Valley. And so we think that we are on the right track about promoting attraction, not on incentives and low cost, but on quality and education and an environment that we believe is conducive for growth.
Well, besides the research institutions, we have other institutions, ours, Cal Lutheran and Cal State Channel Islands, that can, upgrade the workforce.
Absolutely. And naval-based Ventura County is nothing to sneeze at either.
That's
in
right,
terms of deep-rooted institutions with lots of opportunity.
And lots of engineers.
Lots of engineers.
Yeah. And speaking of the Navy base, slide over just a little bit, how important is the harbor for?
Harbor is hugely important. And a lot of people would hope that it would do more than it does. It's what they call, to use a technical word that goes over my head already, but break bulk. It's not a container trade port, and it makes it difficult to compete, to bring in the huge ocean-going liners that bring in massive containers. But without that aspect of the economy, the import and export, mostly import of cars, the movement of fruit, bananas, just about every banana west of the Mississippi comes through here. We think there are some opportunities for some new growth there and some transition in a small way within those markets. But there are two aspects that we think are huge about the port. Number one, it's just the actual economic engine that it is for the things that come in and out. We think that there are opportunities that we're going to try and move on in the near future in partnership with the port, and just using it as sort of the sounding board or the vehicle to promote opportunities for businesses generally in engaging in international trade. So use it almost as symbolic evidence that Ventura County is connected to a global economy in a good way. And even if maybe their exports aren't directly through the Port of Hueneme and they use Los Angeles, that's okay, but we need businesses to think about the 95% of the consumers in the globe that are outside the United States in a good. So part of that is just attitude and exposure, but we're building capacity in our Small Business Development Center to do a lot of promotion there and to build the capacity to work with businesses and how to do that effectively.
Okay, so putting on a bigger hat, looking at the whole state, are you concerned about the fact that the Panama Canal is being widened? And
well, absolutely. I mean I've used the word provincial a couple of times, and we like to think that we are self-contained and we can take care of our own. And but no, the reality is we're connected to a global economy, and And I don't even understand all of the dimensions to those threats. But I think the larger question for us is, or not the larger, but the parallel question is, how does, going back to the Newsom issue, how does California position itself as the 8th or 9th or whatever we are largest economy, and not resting on where we've been, and